We are Daniel Fong and Yun Yi Lo. We are presenting our study on listening in the CLIL classroom, interaction between listening strategies and teacher talk. Both of us are working in universities in Hong Kong. We are interested in research topics such as classroom interaction, bilingual education program, and medium of instruction policy. In this talk, we are going to define content and language integrated learning and listening strategies first. They are the key constructs in our study. Then we'll present the methodology and findings of our study, and we'll conclude by some pedagogical implications. For content and language integrated learning, CLIL, is usually characterized by the learning of non-language content subjects such as science and history through a second, foreign, or additional language, L2. And English is a very popular target L2 in CLIL programs. CLIL has been used as an umbrella term to refer to different bilingual education programs, such as immersion programs and English as the medium of instruction programs. In our study, we will also use CLIL as an umbrella term. For CLIL, it's hypothesized that the learning of target language is facilitated by the communicative and authentic context provided by non-language content subjects. So CLIL programs usually have a dual goal, that is, the learning of target language and content knowledge. However, this dual goal is not guaranteed, especially when we examine different types of research evidence. Product-oriented research usually focuses on the learning outcomes of students in the target language and also content subjects learning. A meta-analysis on EMI education in Hong Kong showed that EMI students enjoyed some advantages in the target language learning, but at the expense of their achievement in content subjects such as science and history. In other words, there seems to be a trade-off between language learning and content learning. Even with the advantages in the target language learning, we will also ask the question, is the enhanced L2 proficiency sufficient in meeting the target language goal in CLIL? Especially, we are concerned about the academic language associated with content subject learning. Our recent study on assessment data in content subject indicated that the answer to the question is no, in the sense that some students encountered language barriers when they are asked to express their content knowledge in questions requiring sentence or text production. To further understand the potential negative impact of CLIL on content subject learning, we can examine the quality of classroom interaction so as to understand the knowledge construction process in the classroom. This leads us to process-oriented research in CLIL. These process-oriented research studies show that the quantity and quality of interactions in CLIL classroom have become limited, probably because teachers and students are interacting in their less proficient language. Some CLIL teachers are doubtful of their L2 proficiency, whereas others may not be fully aware of the need to incorporate L2 teaching into their lesson or consider themselves responsible to do so. This may be due to the fact that most of the CLIL teachers are subject specialists. Most of these process-oriented research focus on teacher talk and also teacher-student interaction. What about learners? Studies have shown that in a typical CLIL lesson, teacher talk occupies around 80 to 90% of the classroom interaction time. When students are listening to the teacher talk in the target language, what are they doing in their mind? How do they perceive and understand the input in the target language? With this question in mind, we are turning to listening strategies.
Strategies are defined as mental actions that learners deploy in relation to a language task. In other words, strategy research is interested in understanding what learners are doing in their mind when they are engaged in tasks such as listening and reading. And previous research has identified a range of listening strategies being used by learners. For example, selective attention, meaning listening for and selectively attending to specific keywords. Inferencing, meaning for example using information in the text and guess the meaning of unknown words. Recall of prior knowledge, meaning using prior knowledge from outside the text to enhance comprehension. And monitoring, meaning checking or verifying one's comprehension. So previous research has identified these strategies, among others, being used by learners when they are listening to audio recordings. However, what is being less researched into is the strategies used by learners when listening to the teacher input. In other words, we do not know enough about what learners are doing in their mind when they are processing the teacher input. One of the very few research that has actually delved into listening strategy use by learners when they are listening to the teacher input is Fong and Macro 2019. They reviewed that learners use a range of strategies, including, for example, selective attention, recall of prior knowledge, translation, meaning that learners are mentally translating the incoming stream of language into a language they are more familiar with, for example, their first language. Contextualization for the present lesson, meaning that learners are trying to comprehend the teacher input through recalling what the series of lesson is about, noting that English lessons are not isolated but connected in units. In other words, learners are trying to recall what they have learned in previous lessons and try to expect or predict what they are learning in this lesson when they are comprehending the teacher input. Then they are using all this information to try to help them understand what the teacher is talking about. Now, if learners are indeed using listening strategies to help them comprehend the teacher input in the ESL or EFL classroom, then it is also logical to expect that learners are also using some strategies to help them comprehend the teacher input in the CLIL classroom. And we believe that this is an important angle to investigate what the learners are doing when they are trying to achieve the dual goal of language and content in the CLIL classroom. And that leads to our study on listening strategies in the CLIL classroom. And we intend to answer this research question, which is, what are the listening strategies used by the learners when comprehending the teacher input? In other words, we want to find out what learners are doing in their mind when they are listening to the teacher input. What are the strategies being used by them to facilitate their understanding of the teacher? In our study, we chose to focus on CLIL biology because biology is perceived to be more language demanding among the science subjects, and that it is offered by 95% of secondary schools in Hong Kong. And in the school participating in our study, biology was offered from grade 7 to grade 12. So in other words, students are very familiar with the use of English as their L2 second language when they are learning biology in the classroom. And the students we have in our study, they have Chinese as their first language and English as their second language. In terms of the data collection methods, we conducted lesson observations of grade 11 classes, and we observed a unit of 6 lessons all on the topic biodiversity. We also conducted stimulated recall interviews with a purposive sample of 8 students who are all aged 16 years old with different academic abilities. So in other words, we have some students who are better in the academic achievement in general and some who are weaker. And we also have some students who are better particularly in their English proficiency and some weaker. So students were interviewed individually with the videotaped lessons as stimuli. Similar to previous research, there were predetermined pauses incorporated in the stimulated recall interviews. So in other words, we selected some episodes that we think are moments that students may be using some strategies in their mind to facilitate their understanding of the teacher input. So these are moments when, for example, the teacher is explaining a lot of content, or moments when there are some communication breakdowns between the teacher and the students. So we think that these are moments that students may be doing something in their mind to help them understand what the teacher is saying. At the same time, we also allow students to pause the videos by themselves because we are researching into listening strategies, and we want to understand what students are doing in their mind. So there may be moments when they're actually doing something in their mind, but these moments may not be those episodes that we have selected. So that's why we allow students to auto-pause the video, to pause the video by themselves in order to enhance validity. So letting them pause and self-report what they were doing in their mind in some moments in the lesson. In terms of the coding of strategies, we did so based on existing strategies taxonomies. But at the same time, we allow some flexibility and we add new categories where relevant because, as I mentioned earlier, listening strategy research has been mostly focusing on listening to audio recordings, and we expect that there may be some new strategies that can be identified in this context of listening to the teacher input in the CLIL classroom. And we achieved iterator reliability by having a trained RA and the researcher coding the simulator recall interviews separately and then comparing the coding. And we resolved all the discrepancies in the end. Now, coming to the findings, the first thing that we found is that there are some strategies which were also found by previous listening research that are being used by our students. So for example, selective attention, visualization, meaning that students are trying to make a mental picture and help them understand what they are listening to, translation, and others. At the same time, we have found some strategies that have not been identified from previous listening strategy research, and these strategies, in other words, they are novel and particularly relevant to CLIL. For example, one of these strategies, which is novel and particularly relevant to CLIL, is the division of terminology. So here, the student was reporting that when the teacher said biodiversity, I used to try to understand it by seeing it as a whole. After the teacher divide the words with bio and diversity, and then the student understands the term more deeply. So in other words, the student was trying to break down the word biodiversity into more comprehensible chunks, into more comprehensible parts, bio and diversity, to ease his understanding. And the second strategy that we have found, which is novel, is bootstrapping. So the student here is reporting, yes, at the beginning, the teacher mentioned something that I didn't understand, like evolutionary relationship. But she went on to explain how if they're in the same group, they might have descended from the same ancestors. And then that's when I got it. So here, the student was reporting, so I started to get what she was talking about after she elaborated a bit more. And if we try to dig deep into what the student is saying here, then the student was trying to connect evolutionary relationship with a familiar word, ancestors. So it means that the student was trying to connect the two words. One word that the student understood before, and one word that is being taught by the teacher. So the student was trying to relate these two words, and we term it bootstrapping because the students was using some existing knowledge, the word ancestors, to try to go to the next level to understand the next word, evolutionary relationship. And the third strategy that I want to highlight here is analogy. So here the student was reporting, again, is the die word, is the teacher mentioned how it was two choices right away, two choices right away. And she also gave us some examples, like how it's with or without. It wasn't just a comparison of two features, but one with and one without a certain feature. So here, the student was reporting that she was following the teacher's analogy of some daily examples. So in the actual episodes, I haven't quoted here, but in the actual episodes, the teacher was saying something like, in daily examples, there are some creatures with a short neck and some creatures without a short neck. So, and this analogy with some daily examples of like some creatures with and without a certain feature was being used to understand a dichotomous key with binary choices. Okay, so here the student was relying on this analogy to try to understand the teacher input. So far, what our study has revealed is, first of all, we have found some strategies being identified in previous listening strategy research. And secondly, we also found some novel strategies and which are particularly relevant in the CLIL context, in the context of listening to the teacher input in the CLIL classroom. But interestingly, even for the strategies that are previously identified in listening strategy research, students interacted with the teacher input in their strategy use. So we term these strategies teacher-aided strategies. Let's look at some examples and it will be clearer what we mean by teacher-aided strategies. First of all, we have what we call aided selective attention and division of terminology. So if we look at this student report of what the student was doing, the student was saying the teacher split the term into different parts and only explained the parts of the words which carried the bulk of the meaning to make it easier to understand. So during this episode, the teacher was actually teaching the students the word cytology. And in cytology, cyto means cell. So in other words, the student was interacting with the teacher input mentally and thinking, oh, the teacher was directing my attention to a specific part in this word, okay, cyto meaning cell. And then I'm also trying to divide the terminology into more comprehensible parts, okay. So this is what we call teacher-aided strategy. Another example, aided visualization. So the student reported seeing the teacher drew the seeds in the flower which was embedded by the cones, plus the definition of naked. So I understood the seeds in the conifer was not surrounded by anything. So here, during this episode, the teacher was drawing some naked seeds on the board, on the whiteboard, and then the student was actually being aided in making a mental picture in the mind. Okay, so that's why we call it aided visualization, because the teacher was helping the student to mentally visualize, okay, naked seeds, okay. And finally, aided translation. So here the student was saying, if a teacher did not say the Chinese translation of succulent, I would not be able to understand what the word means. So in other words, the teacher was aiding and helping the student to translate into the L1 in their mind. So all these are teacher-aided strategies because the teacher was assisting students to try to use certain strategies, and the students were indeed interacting with the teacher input in their mental actions. So to conclude, we found some novel strategies that are relevant to students comprehending teacher input in the CLIL classroom. For example, division of terminology, bootstrapping, and analogy. And these are both language-oriented, for example, division of terminology, and content-oriented, for example, visualization. Okay, so just visualizing, making a mental picture. And the existence of teacher-aided strategies highlights the importance of interaction between the teacher input and learner internal processing. In other words, we want to emphasize that it is important for students to deploy strategies corresponding to what the teacher is saying. Okay. And our research also points to some important pedagogical implication. First of all, CLIL teachers need to consider how they are giving input to students because the students, including those not verbally interacting with the teacher, they are actually doing a lot of things in their mind, okay? They may be using some of these teacher-aided strategies. So that's why to facilitate students' uptake of teacher input, the teacher can actively prompt students' use of strategies, as the examples shown when we are describing teacher-aided strategies. And these are the references And finally, thank you. And if you have any questions or comments, you can send it to my email here.